Hello, and welcome back to Conversa's Company Podcast, which was our placeholder name for this show, but due to the votes that we receive in our socials, we now have an official name, which I am super excited to announce. So without further ado, I'm Jeremy Shear, the founder of Conversa, and I'm happy to introduce our newly named show, The PodShop.
Woohoo!
Yeah, round of applause for us. We did it, folks. We did it. And I wanna introduce our wonderful guest, my co-host Caitlin. Hello, Caitlin.
Hello.
And Josh, welcome.
Hey.
Josh is our superstar guest for this episode. And Josh, I believe it was you who initially came up with the name The Pod Shop, and then that was voted to glory on our socials.
That's right. Hopefully all of our listeners got a good takeaway there, that the best way to come up with a name is to panic 30 minutes before you have to be on a podcast where you have to have a name ready and just slam a coffee and brainstorm real quick. So
yeah, 100%. Right. Don't overthink it. Just come up with some stuff. You know, and sometimes really the best ideas come that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so awesome. We are The Pod Shop. I love that name. And I think it works because that's what this podcast is all about, right? We're going to be talking about podcasting, the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the under the hood stuff that makes podcasting what it is. So good job, Josh. Well done.
thank you.
All right. So now, everyone listening and or watching, thanks for coming back. And we hope you enjoyed our first episode, which was video only. This episode you might be listening to this one. So this is the debut of the audio version of our show. And now last time we talked about production horror stories, complete with sound effects and, thanks to Caitlin, some cool, scary cartoon graphics. And this time, we're not going to do anything quite so terrifying. We're going to do something a little more practical. Namely, we're going to talk about podcast equipment. And to introduce that segment, I'm going to hand things over to Caitlin.
Excellent. Well, now here's the thing. I have a fun little name for this segment idea, so that I'm happy to announce. And it is, drumroll please, fact or fiction. It's still going. Whatever could it be?
This is really good audio.
Oh, yeah.
This is just... But now, are you ready, audience? You are fully drum rolled and prepared. I think you're ready to hear what this section is. It is Fact or Fiction, Podcast Equipment Edition. There are so many questions surrounding podcast equipment. What kind do I need? Do I even need podcast equipment? Is my computer good enough just the way it is? Well, we have our fabulous sound person, Josh here to debunk some of these myths and questions that we have around it. So first, before we get into those fact or fiction questions, I would love to give the floor to Josh. Josh, if you want to introduce yourself, give a little background on who you are. This way we can really just dive deep into the topic of this section.
And by the way, I will be fact checking Josh as he reveals his history. So
that's you need to, because I'm actually a pathological liar.
I have government databases open and ready. So go ahead. Just remember, you're under oath.
So check this one. I'm the director of production at Conversa, and I started, I have a degree in audio engineering and recording from the University of Southern Mississippi. It's did I get the best education there? Debatable, right? But I've always been really, really interested in audio. I grew up playing classical music and orchestras and stuff. And then I downloaded Audacity onto my mom's office computer. Thank God for Audacity, by the way. If you're listening, you don't know what I'm talking about, go just type in Audacity Audio or something like that into Google. It'll bring you to this freeware, just some free software that is super easy to get into, very kind of straightforward and really easy to run on pretty much any machine. You got an old like 2010 laptop, Audacity can probably run on it. And that was a godsend of just like spending hours, or an opportunity for me, someone that had no money, no equipment, like as a teenager, spending hours just using that software, and it got me interested in all this audio engineering stuff. But graduating high school, I really found that college wasn't for me. And very soon I dropped out pretty much and started a career at Best Buy, a whole like 8-year career. Did the whole thing, designed home theater systems. I ended up doing a lot of people managing and all that. And Best Buy has some pretty dang good benefits when it comes to education. Because once I hit a certain age, I was like, okay, I think I can go to college now. And so as I was working there, late nights and stuff like that, I would end up going to classes and stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and I was able to do a lot of stuff online, and that was really good. And then right out of college, I really had this idea of doing something super, super technical. So I worked with a computer scientist and programmer to develop this kind of like art installation, this like audio art installation. We thought it was like the shit. Where basically it's going to sound super complicated, but it's really not that bad. But basically you install some cameras and some speakers into a space. And we used VR equipment to get this working, but, we run this program on a computer with a piece of music. It's just 2 minutes long, but recorded, at 32 different parts. And we like did this whole like studio recording for all these different parts. And what the program does is, as you as a person walks through that space holding the VR equipment that's picked up by the cameras, it plays one of those different 32 parts constantly. So what we really wanted to do was kind of create this like everlasting piece of music that just kind of, was random based on how people walked through a space. And what we did was we set it up in a bookstore. And so we just invited people to grab one of the controllers and go browse some books, like go check out, some books. And then basically their interest in books dictated what music was playing at the time. So what we tried to calculate, we got some kid that was like getting this physics master or something to like calculate how many hours, and it ends up being around like 10,000 hours of unique music that could be created by this 2-minute recording that we spent like maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 hours recording in the studio. So a huge return on investment. A lot of our audience is going to be B2B, business people. That ROI, that was some good stuff. So
Very
that
cool.
is so cool. Did that travel? Did that exhibit travel to different other universities, or where was this set up?
So unfortunately, this was right as I graduated, which was still at the height of the pandemic. So we shopped it out, but like pretty much no one was super keen on like getting a bunch of people together in a small space, because it really did have to be done in a small space. I did this in Mississippi, so it was a little bit more doable, but yeah, I mean, it was a cool idea, just a really unfortunate time to come up with the idea, I think. But soon after that, I connected with Jeremy, and get to use those skills that I learned pretty much every day now. So.
Wow. That is really cool. I'm a huge music fan. I love Beethoven's my favorite classical artist. But wow, that's like really cool. That Jeremy, you're like pretty musically inclined as well, aren't right?
Yeah, I'm kind of. I mean, I'll say I like Beethoven too, mainly his earlier stuff. I think his later stuff is too commercial.
His later stuff so
Just kind of went off brand,
You know, just
he was a sellout.
Yeah, you know, I like his cool like indie stuff early on.
Right in the middle of his career, he was getting a little political, and that was kind of like, you know,
He lost
I
his
hate when
edge,
artists
man.
do that.
He lost his, you
Lost
know.
his edge. My music teacher back in high school, he said that Beethoven was the Eminem of his time. That's the way he always introduced Beethoven. And I was like, fair enough. You know, it was to an extent he was, you know, just more of the edgier stuff, to be honest. That's one really cool thing I love about the Conversa group. Apparently, I didn't know this, but like everyone is kind of like musically inclined to an extent. Like we have Josue, who's a pianist, right? That's what he mentioned in the last episode. So I think I thought that was just super cool. I sing and do ukulele, but I don't necessarily count that as, you know, the classical arts, as you will, compared to some of our group.
Now, does this mean that Eminem is the Beethoven of our time? I'm going to go with no, but Eminem's awesome, but I don't think he's Beethoven.
Right. Anyway, we do have some fact or fiction questions. Now that we've established who Josh is, his credentials, if you will, for like answering some of our questions, why don't we just jump right in? So my first question, as a fact or fiction, is myth or fact or fiction? I need a full studio before recording my first podcast.
That's definitely a fact. All right. So no, I'm just kidding. Look, obviously that's fiction. If you do any research into it, that's like the first thing you'll find is how to, you know, do a podcast with the least amount of stuff, basically. Now there is a threshold, I would say. You know, I'm not going to tell you that you can't record your podcast with your iPhone or your MacBook or whatever, right? In fact, there is a podcasting service or platform, Anchor, that basically advertises that. Like, download the Anchor app and record your podcast with your earpods connected to your iPhone and make ad revenue from it. I will say that if you are in a like super, I mean, iPhones now, like I have an iPhone 13 Flex, the microphones have gotten really, really good, right? And if you're in a really quiet place, you know, you could probably get away with it. My biggest issue, though, is that most people don't have that space to do that. And especially if you're trying to run, you know, maybe run video or something like that, there are going to be some things that you're going to have. So I would say there is a threshold of equipment. Usually it's very basic that you kind of just want to at least, you know, look into. But it's not, you definitely don't have to have like the full setup like you're seeing me, Jeremy, and Caitlin have here. But we're professionals.
Don't try this at home. Right. Or actually, you can try it at home. But wait, so Josh, so what's like the minimum setup that you need to record, let's just say an audio podcast for now. What's the minimum setup that you need to record an audio podcast that's going to be good? Like, you know, better than just okay, that's actually going to sound like pretty darn good.
Yeah, I would say a USB mic, a decent laptop, and it, depending on your setup, or if you're talking, you know, by yourself, or you're talking with a local guest, or you're doing a remote podcast, you know, a different piece of audio software, depending on what you're doing. So right now we're using Riverside.fm to record remotely, and that does wonders. We love this platform for sure. If you're doing something locally, Audacity, like I mentioned earlier, completely free, and does great. And so there's a couple of different ways you can go about it. But I would say look into a USB mic. And if you're doing something remotely, I would look into just basic headphones, just so that you can hear the other person on the other side.
Okay. So since you mentioned headphones, I want to skip ahead to another question that we have. So, true or false, fact or fiction, you should always wear headphones when recording?
I mean, it's got to be fiction, because if you watch, most any podcast now, you'll see some people wear headphones all the time, and that's kind of part of the aesthetic, right? And then you'll also see podcasts like where no one's wearing headphones and they seem to sound fine. My big thing is, if you're recording remotely, yes, you must wear headphones. But if you're recording locally, or you're just recording yourself, not necessarily a thing. In the professional, pro podcasting world, a lot of times the headphones are used to receive, most people understand this. Your news anchor has some earpiece in their ear, and they're receiving information. A lot of times the headphones will be connected to a producer, and also to where you can monitor your own voice, so that you're, if you find yourself getting really close to your microphone, you can kind of back off and be like, okay, actually that sounds terrible. I'm going to back off a little bit. Right. That's usually what they're for. Not necessarily, you have to have that. That's definitely not the case. But when you're doing a remote recording, you have to hear your guest, right? So there's two ways that you can hear them. You can plug in headphones and you can hear them here, or you're going to hear them through your speakers. Now, the thing is, if you hear them through your speakers, what else is going to hear it is your microphone. And so there's two things that can happen. The first thing is, if whatever program that you're using does not have any sort of echo cancellation, if you're on a Skype call or you're FaceTiming or something like that, you may have, or you would have experienced this, where, if you're telling a super funny joke, I know Jeremy runs into this all the time. He's just joking all the time, and people be laughing all the time, and people just losing their minds at how funny Jeremy is.
Okay, enough.
What ends up happening is you're trying to finish your joke, right? And people are already just busting up. You may find that either they're on your side, their laugh may be cut out because you're trying to talk in. But then on their side, because they're laughing, you may be cutting in and out. And what's happening is that program is cutting out those vocal frequencies so that the other microphone isn't picking up the other person. So if the program that you're using has something like that, what ends up happening is you'll hear that kind of cutout of the person, and it kind of sounds artificial and doesn't sound natural. And for a picky audio person, they may hate that, right? And you may be missing key information. They may be trying to say something, and because the echo cancellation it doesn't come through. Or you may run into an issue where it doesn't have echo cancellation, and so then every time the guest talks, the microphone picks it up, and so you have a literal echo, which is, I would say, a worse problem. So, and that one's very easy to understand. But you can avoid both of those by just wearing headphones.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy thing to do. Now, I get it. Not everybody likes the headphone podcaster aesthetic. And in those cases, just make sure that you're using echo cancellation and do what you can with it. Most people are pretty used to it. We're all or a lot of us are on Zoom a lot, have been for the last couple of years, and have gotten used to that sound.
So I have a question then. You mentioned about microphones. You mentioned a USB microphone. Well, I have a question is XLR mics are always better than USB. But before you answer that question, would you mind going into what a USB mic is versus an XLR mic?
Yeah, totally. So for a long time, we really didn't distinguish the difference because there really just was XLR. That was just kind of the kind of microphone that we used. And what that is, not to get like too technical, is it's a microphone that sends a signal through a cable that then goes into a device that today changes that signal into a digital signal so that a computer can understand what it is. Usually to use that kind of microphone, you're having to have a mixer or some sort of converter or whatever. And if you're not an audio person, you're just someone that's like, I just want to talk into a microphone. It can get really complicated very quickly. You start realizing, I have to have like 5 cables just to plug in a microphone, especially if you're looking at best microphones, right? And then like the Shure SM7B, which is like the most popular one, right? Caitlin's using one right now. They're like, okay, I'm going to grab that one because like everybody uses that one. But then you realize that you have to have like a cloud lifter, and then you have to run it into a mixer. And then you run that into your computer, and then you have to have all these adapters, and then your mixer has all these knobs, and now you have to learn how to use all those knobs, right? But there are some pros to using an XLR, which is you have a lot more control, obviously, over the sound of your microphone, and you can just have a bunch of different microphones that can plug into your mixer and have some variety of what you want to use them for. I would say the XLR mics are really good if you're trying to make some music as well as do a podcast, right? Because then you can swap up the microphones and not have to, spend $300 every time you want to buy a USB mic and then do all that stuff. Because a USB microphone basically does all that inside of the microphone, right? So typically the XLR microphones will be less expensive, but you have to have more equipment with it. But the USB microphones, obviously they're way more simple. You literally just plug it into your computer. Your computer knows what to do with it, but all of that signal processing is done within the actual microphone itself. So you tend to get a less quality sound, but with it being a little bit more expensive comparatively to an XLR mic, but it's much more simple, if that makes sense.
Okay. So on to the next Fact or Fiction. Fact or Fiction. You can run Audacity on an old Commodore 64 computer.
I think, so this one wasn't on the agenda.
There's no way.
Is that on the website?
No, I don't know. I just wanted to throw you a curveball.
I doubt it, but I bet someone. So here's for some video game fans out there, and there's a trend of people trying to get Doom to play on pretty much anything.
Oh, really?
I've seen Doom run on a pregnancy test. So
what?
All right. Anyway,
I think we can get Audacity to run on something.
I just have a lot of love in my heart for the Commodore 64. Anyway, let's see. Oh, here's a good one. So, fact or fiction? Podcast recording equipment is expensive.
Depends. Obviously, value and money and all that. Like, it's completely relative. $500 to me at 14 was like $1 million. But I will say this, relative to what things can cost, I think definitely fiction. Right now I'm running on probably like $100 worth of equipment other than my MacBook. That's the most expensive one. But it's not even that like high end of a MacBook. It's, it ran me around $1,000. But it does a lot more than just, record podcasts. Right. So, but, I'm running on a, $25 XLR microphone, and a $100 mixer, that gets me pretty good results, I would say. Now you can definitely go better, right? Caitlin's got the SM7B. That's an amazing microphone, but there is some like extra stuff that you have to go with there. And actually it's pretty interesting how you have to use it to get the most out of it, right? A lot of people, there was like a viral video of this guy, like, I wanted to have my dream microphone, so I dropped $500 on this microphone, and it sucks. I hate it. And then like all of the audio nerds were coming out and being like, you had it like 30 feet away from you.
Right.
Silly.
So, you definitely don't have to spend that much. And USB microphones, I was talking about earlier, because it has all that stuff in there, right? You tend to get a lesser quality sound for more money than an XLR microphone and all that stuff, right? So, and they're trying to hit like this kind of like consumer and prosumer, audience there with those. And usually your price range is going to be between like $50 to $150. Like $150, I think, is like the most someone that's like trying to get into podcasting would probably spend on a microphone. And I would say like in like 2008, that was pretty rough. $150 microphone, a USB microphone would have been kind of rough. But now you can get like $150 USB mic is going to sound pretty dang good. There are some definite options, like the Audio-Technica 2005 is like $60, and we actually use that for a lot of our clients. It's a hypercardioid, and what that means is that it only picks up like directly in front of the microphone, cuts out a lot of the background noise, makes it to where you really don't have to be in your closet or under a blanket or something like that to get some good quality audio. You just have to use it right? You have to get a little bit closer to it. It's a little bit, lower in volume. You got to learn how to work with all that stuff in your computer. But, $60 and some ear pods, will get you sounding pretty dang professional, right out of the box. So I would say it's pretty easy to get away, with, just, a little bit of a nice dinner out.
Right.
Yeah. You kind of touched on the final question we have on our agenda, which is fact or fiction. I have to record in my closet if I don't have a studio.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I think what this comes down to, obviously fiction, right?
None of us are
that would be
closet.
Ridiculous. Yeah. I think it really comes down to just learning how to use your microphone. Utilize YouTube here, right? When you buy your microphone, you probably did some research on it. You decided that's the one I'm going to, or you went to Best Buy, right? Or whatever. And some like gamer nerd was like, yeah, man, I use this to stream like every Friday. By the way, here's my Twitch channel and stuff like that, right? And you were like, okay, cool. I'm gonna take this one. It has a model number. Pop that into YouTube. They'll teach you exactly how to use it. If you're using one of those like kind of Yeti mics, it can be a little bit funny. The way you have to turn it, or it may be swapped, like it has like a switch for different ways that the microphone picks up sound. So, it may be set on like omnidirectional and maybe picking up everything. And you're like, wow, this microphone sounds terrible. But, there's probably a switch on there that makes it to where it's a little bit more directional and cutting out a lot more of that noise. But learning how to use your microphone and then placing it in the right place. If you're watching the video here, you're looking at all three of us, and our microphones are on stands. They are a little bit higher up, kind of offset from your mouth, from our mouths a little bit, just so that it's not getting the plosives. But we all also have like little windscreens on ours too. But again, like you don't even have to have a windscreen if you place it correctly to where the plosives don't actually go into the microphone directly, right? So it really comes down to a lot of that. What a lot of our clients do is, especially if they're doing a video podcast, they'll try and get the microphone out of the shot. Again, like I get it. Not everybody likes that aesthetic. There are people that are like, that's the whole thing. The aesthetic is huge to them, and they love the fact they're trying to get up on it just to make it look good, right? But being close to your microphone really helps just in the sound quality and cutting out a lot of the reverb and the things that your audience will notice as kind of like lesser quality audio, right? There's a reason why, your favorite radio host or your favorite podcaster has that aesthetic. It's more than just the look. It has a practical function of, you want to bring that microphone closer to you, especially if you have a dynamic microphone. You really got to get up on it. The rule a lot of times is like a fist away, that can really, really help with just how professional you sound with a inexpensive microphone in any space, right? Now, if you got a chair, you got a nice big closet full of big coats. I just moved up to Madison, Wisconsin. My closet's about to look like that. If you got a nice big closet, maybe you get a chair in there, maybe get a table in there. It would sound pretty dang good. Another one that I saw is that apparently, out in the journalism world, you're out in the middle of nowhere, doing a story, an audio story, for say like NPR or something like that. You're out there, you're recording your kind of narrative. A lot of those huge professionals, when they're in their hotel room, will just like put a blanket over their head and record there. Now, a lot of, those situations are good if it is audio only. And those are very cheap ways to get like super great sound. But it's definitely not necessary if you just know how to use your microphone. So
good point. I have recorded in closets before. And one time there was a closet, and if the door shut on you, it locked you in the closet. And for some reason, there was no knob on the inside of the door. So I always was very careful to keep it a little bit propped open. But one time I wasn't careful enough, and it locked. And I was locked in the closet, and no one else was home.
What did you do?
I ended up karate kicking the door open.
Oh my God.
Which was kind of cool. I'm sort of glad it happened. I'm like, hey, I have a pretty powerful
I bet it didn't
kick.
lock after that.
Yeah. So there are many more, true or false equipment questions we could ask, but we got to wrap it up a little bit. So for our listeners, what are your top couple of takeaways when it comes to podcast recording equipment?
Look at your savings account and dedicate maybe like, I don't know, 10 grand. Also, just sell your house and move to like a super, remote area. Make sure there's no outside noise, and, build a dedicated studio in your house. That's the bare minimum.
I like that. If you're married, divorce your wife, leave your children, and devote your entire life to getting the best possible audio.
Only podcasting.
Only podcasting. You want to start a podcast, you gotta really earn it.
That's right.
No, obviously, the bare minimum is you need to have a working computer. Usually, there are some alternatives. Spend a little bit of time just, doing a little bit of research, listening to our show, going to, you can go to conversa.com. There's some resources there. You have to have a computer. I would look into a inexpensive USB microphone, something to keep it up, and very cheap headphones, because all they're good for is just hearing your guest, especially if you're just trying to do a remote recording, and do a little bit of testing. Download that free Audacity application, talk into it with it recording, listen back to it, see what it sounds like, adjust your microphone. Like just spend a little bit of time learning how to use the equipment that you have, and later on, if you want to sound, once you get really into it, there's always room to grow. There's always room to decide, okay, I do want to have an XLR microphone because of this, and this that I've decided now that I've not into it would really help me out. So now I can look into different mixers and stuff like that. Like, grow with it is definitely what I would recommend. Yeah.
So, no, Josh, thank you. That was some really good information, really good advice. By the way, you passed all the fact checks too. So you can breathe easy. Josh is telling the truth, folks. We have the official word. So that's going to do it for this episode, for episode number 2 of what is now officially called the PodShop. You can find the podcast on any podcast platform, through any podcast app on your phone. So please check it out and subscribe, because we're going to have many more episodes coming your way on all kinds of useful topics. And you can learn more about us, Conversa, on our website, of course, at conversa.com. That's Conversa with 2 N's, by the way, CONN Versa.com. And you can follow us on all our social channels. We're on LinkedIn, we're on TikTok, we're on Instagram. I think that's it for now, right? Actually, we're also on Facebook. Actually, I created a Facebook page too.
What? When did you do that?
Last week, Adam. I mean, because we have Instagram, we might as well have Facebook too. So anyway, but on any of those platforms, it's just at Conversa, CONN Versa. So thanks so much for checking us out, for tuning in, and we will check you out on the next episode.